Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Showcase Shop Talk on meeting students where they are. I'm really excited to be with you today. I'm one of the hosts for today's show. My name is Sophie White, and I manage the Showcase series at EDUCAUSE.
Hi everyone, I'm Janae Robert. I'm a senior researcher at EDUCAUSE, and I'm also co-hosting today.
Great. And we are so excited to have three special guests with us in the studio today. We have Madeleine Renken, who is a Title III instructional designer at Kaskaskia College. Maddie also serves on our Young Professionals Advisory Committee at EDUCAUSE and is highly involved with that group as well. Ryan Wetzel is a manager for creative learning initiatives at Penn State University. And Stephanie Thomas is a media commons consultant at Penn State University. So thank you all for being with us today.
Thanks for having us on.
Thank you.
So Janae and Ryan, you used to work together. I'm curious, is it fun
Oh, yeah.
to be in the studio? It's been a while.
Oh, it's great. Janae and I always have great conversations.
Amazing.
Yeah, I miss the group at Penn State. They were a really fun and creative group to work with. So it's always really exciting when I get to work with them now in my role at EDUCAUSE. And I've also appropriately made all of them pay me so that I don't say all of their deep, dark secrets. So we have that as well.
That's right.
I had not heard about that side, but great. Glad that's covered.
Don't tell anybody. It's just between us on this call.
Awesome. Well, yeah, we can get started with, however, whatever you all want to talk about. This showcase is really about how student preferences in terms of technology use has changed as we've come out of the pandemic. All of us as professionals and as students are used to this consumer experience of using technology that we're trying to reflect in higher ed. And we'll be talking about this a bit more through the showcase and our Teaching and Learning Horizon report, which launches in May of 2024. So I guess I'd be curious to get started. Janae, you worked on the Horizon report. Are there any, really special tidbits about this meeting students where they are topic that you want to dive into to start?
Yeah, I think some of the most interesting trends with regard to meeting students where they are situating that where they are piece. Where are students in the world in this time in history, in this time in technology? Obviously, we had to actually work pretty hard to not make this an all AI Horizon report. We had to separate AI into its own new honorary trend category. So that I think says a lot about where students are in the world they're living in. Also, for the first time, cybersecurity and privacy came up as a trend in our Teaching and Learning Horizon report, which often we see those types of trends in our Data and Analytics Horizon reports or in our actual Privacy and Security Horizon reports. But I think it's very much top of mind for people now, for students living in a digital world. So those are just a few of the interesting things that I can point out.
Great. Yeah, that's really interesting. Stephanie and Ryan, I'm curious. I know you've been working on an initiative to support students at Penn State. Does this resonate with you? And can you tell us more about what that initiative is?
Yeah, definitely. And it really does resonate. I think this concept of meeting students where they are, making sure that we're limiting the barriers for them to have not only a positive experience at their institution, but one that is beneficial in terms of their career goals, their discipline, their scholarly pursuits, and something that helps inform us, those that work at universities, right? We have to make choices all the time about what technology do we invest in? What services do we invest in? What on-ramps do we create for our students to be successful? We can only take that so far without actually making space for students to tell us what they need as well. And so having that student voice be a part of the process is really pretty critical. And there's so many different ways to approach it, and it depends on kind of your institution on what kinds of approaches work best. And something we've started experimenting with over the last year, so this is still very new for us, is the idea of putting together a student advisory board. And those have existed for a long time. We're not the first people, obviously, to do something like that. But this one is specifically geared towards the kinds of technology decisions that are made at the university in terms of the kinds of technologies they have access to, how they access them, how they learn about them, right? And how they influence some of the decisions that are made and experiences that are created. And so Stephanie and I created the Student Technology Advisory Representatives. We worked backwards from STAR as our acronym and got a good title that fit pretty well, because they're our student stars, our IT stars we started with. And over the last year, as we've gotten to know this group, they've become more and more comfortable sharing with us their feedback on a whole host of technology related, not just IT, but technology related, issues and opportunities, affordances and access that they have and have experienced at the university. And we've brought them challenges, and we can go into some details about what that looks like, really seeking their feedback. So it's really about creating space for that student voice.
And Penn State is a big place. So you've got to think, we're trying to reach students at, different campuses all across the world. And that means different challenges depending on where those students are at in their college journey.
Definitely goes back to that meeting students where they are topic. They're all over the world. Are there any specific challenges that stand out to you that you've been able to, address as a result of the feedback the students on the STAR team gave?
Yeah, I think one that has recurred over the last year, that I won't say that we've solved it, but we have a better understanding of where kind of the challenges and opportunities are how students prefer to be communicated to about changes or new opportunities. So one specific example, is that Penn State offers students, faculty, and staff access to Adobe Creative Cloud. So we're an Adobe Creative campus. And there were changes to the process mid-semester, last semester. And we needed the students to know how they were going to now interact with Adobe Creative Cloud versus how they previously did. And so, when we understood what the changes were and we had, a plan to communicate, we met with our students, our STAR students, and said, this is our communication plan. This is going to roll out next month. This is how we're going to communicate to you and your peers, we think. And now we want your feedback on, will you receive this message? Will your peers receive this message? What questions do you have that are not covered? And where the message appears is important. And they gave us great feedback on, hey, you're missing something. You're not pushing this information out through the LMS. And if it's not in Canvas, we're not going to know about it, right? It was a strong opinion that we got from them. And quite honestly, that wasn't even on our radar. And so we quickly added that to the comms plan for these technology changes. And I think the overall experience was enhanced as a result. And that's not something we would have thought of without that student voice being a part of the process early enough to affect change. And I think that's a critical piece as well.
And we got a lot of feedback that it was pretty seamless for the students because they were able to know about it and make all of the changes that were needed. And I think that was actually a really important step in doing that.
Ooh, I love that. That's a great example. Thank you so much. Maddie, I'm curious to hear from you, your work with students and working with faculty members in your role as an instructional designer. Do you have anything you want to share about how you've brought the student voice into the conversation to meet students where they are?
Sorry, I think I missed about half of that prompt.
Oh
Could you repeat
no.
that, please?
Yeah, definitely. Can you talk about your experience as an instructional designer, working with students or working with faculty members to support students? And, as we talked about, you're also a class of 2020 graduate. So if you have any personal experiences from your time as a student, feel free to share those as well.
Yeah, so I graduated as a student during the 2020 pandemic, the height of it. And really, I don't think any instructors were prepared for what was about to come with moving everything to online. We had never even heard of Zoom, so we were just like adjusting to that. We were used to having classes in session and learning how to do things with certain tools for my certain degree program in person. So it was quite a transition to moving that online. But luckily, I was in a field that it was used to working with technology to accommodate our needs. So we did a lot of tutorials over Zoom class sessions and such. I think um, though I think it's better what they're doing with engagement now, trying to keep people's cameras on and asking engaging questions rather than just having it be a one-sided conversation. I think that makes more of an interactive experience that I do kind of wish we had at the end of my undergrad. So I think we've come a long way, but I think there's certain things we can do to make the student experience more engaging and feel like they're really getting a lot more out of their degree program. So I try to think about that perspective when I'm designing courses with faculty, making sure that it's not just reading a bunch of chapters and going through slideshows. It's like making engaging conversations about the content so that everyone's learning, and it's multiple modes of communication between the instructor and student, student, that sort of interaction. So I think yeah, it's been an informative experience going through the pandemic, but we've made loads of progress.
Seems like communication is one of those key themes that I'm hearing now around meeting students where they are, is about communicating with them in the ways that make sense for them, not necessarily the ways that make sense for us. And also, I've heard the word feedback once or twice in this conversation. So I think I love hearing that as a researcher, of course. All of my work, I'm constantly encouraging people as an action step, take this research that we did here and do it in your local context and find out what your students are saying and what your stakeholders are saying. So I love that, and I love the idea that meeting students where they are is almost like a collaboration with students in a sense, working with them towards their educational goals rather than just designing something and hoping it works for them.
It absolutely is. Collaborative experience, Janae, I think is exactly the right way to look at it. And there are just, they bring remarkable energy and life experiences to the table. And we need to capitalize on that and create opportunities and avenues for them to contribute. Because not only does it help us do our work better, but it also prepares them even more for their eventual career or postgraduate goals. And as much as we can bring them into the fold for that. And I think another reflection on what you said about communication and the choices that we make in terms of communicating out, and what they prefer is not always what we would prefer or sort of know, is that it's also a constantly moving target, right?
Yeah.
So the solutions of today are not going to be the solutions of tomorrow. And so the only way you can plan for that at an institutional level is to create the scaffolding for these ongoing conversations to exist. That should just be a part of your process and as early in the process as possible.
I love that. It's really more of a mindset on the practitioner's part as opposed to here are the 5 tools you're going to need to communicate with students for the rest of your career. It's more about the mindset and learning how to engage with students in a meaningful way. So I really appreciate that perspective.
Yeah, I think that's so important. As you know, I don't want to take over this conversation with AI, but as AI changes so fast that, trying to come up with a way to govern or create policies around AI is such a moving target, that having the communication of this is how you use AI effectively in the classroom to meet these outcomes is maybe more effective. Janae, you're more the AI expert, but I think, it's changing so fast that we need to keep those communication methods open.
Yeah, it's a running joke at EDUCAUSE actually that whatever we do related to AI within about 5 to 7 business days, it'll be old information. So, yeah, it's something that we're rapidly trying to keep up with. And that's where I think a lot of that conversation has evolved over the last year or two with regard to AI, but other technologies, emerging technologies as well. That we're not simply trying to teach people, give people the fish. We're trying to teach them how to fish and how to keep up with things and how to be flexible. So this digital transformation theme starts to work its way back into the AI conversation. I think a couple of years ago, we were all like, well, how do we just react to this? And now we're thinking this is really an element of digital literacy and supporting all of the digital work at our institutions. It's just the world we live in now that things happen so rapidly. So how do we keep up with that? We've had quite a few conversations lately about institutional resilience in the sense that we have to keep up with things at such a quicker pace. And to bring it back to kind of meeting students where they are, that our students are evolving quickly and living in a quickly evolving world. So if they have to keep up with all of this, then we doubly have to keep up with all of this.
It does present a unique challenge when specifically talking about AI in the context that you just described, Janae, is that for the most part, most of us don't have a background in AI, did not go to school for AI or study it in any meaningful sort of way. So, I mean, we know just as much as the students do.
Yeah.
Maybe a step ahead, maybe a step behind in certain areas. And that provides its own unique challenges, but also opportunities. Again, circling back to the students, is that we shouldn't decide for them how AI fits into their curriculum and their disciplines now. They need to decide that with us, as they will be the ones to continue using it in whatever form it takes, constantly shifting form going forward. So I think that's an important frame for why this moment, right, in higher education with disruptive technology is different from previous moments with disruptive technology.
And we're actually working on that as part of our meetings. We try to introduce a new technology tool as part of what the students get back from the meeting. So we're getting their feedback, we're getting the responses and working with them, but they're also benefiting by either getting some sort of demo on software or getting to try out something new that we haven't launched at the campuses yet. And so we're also involving them in that constant conversation of how are we using it? How do you want to use it? What do you know? And a lot of times the students will show us things that we didn't know. We have some digital multimedia design students who are really familiar with some of these tools. And so we've done everything from create text to image kind of graphics, as well as, backgrounds for portraits. And we've even made board games with them using AI. So it's really a fun way for them to also have an engagement activity that bonds students from all the different campuses and communities as kind of like part of our meeting structure.
I love all these creative solutions. That's great. Maddie, I'm curious. I know you started a new role. It's been, I don't know how many months, a month or two. I'm curious, do you have perspectives on serving? You served one specific student population at one institution. You're serving a new student population now. Have you seen kind of differences in how the students are reacting to technology, or is it too soon to tell?
It might be soon for my current institution, but what I've seen with students is I think it's honestly like a false assumption that all students know how to use technology. I
Mhm.
think that's something that a lot of people assume when they're setting up courses. Even they assume that people have access to good internet connection, different resources. They have an understanding of technology, but then there's also the other opposite of the spectrum where I literally had a student come up to me who said she took an entire course on her phone. Um, so I don't know if she had access to a computer. So I think that's another component of like moving forward from the pandemic times. Do people have access to technology to even learn how to use it? So I think it really depends on your student population, seeing what kind of demographics show up at your respective institutions. Because I think the institution and location does matter.
Yeah, that's a great point. Some of the showcase resources, we have two videos in this showcase related to meeting students where they are. One of them is really focused on supporting international students, and there are some examples in there about, how do you build courses if students only have access to a smartphone and maybe not a laptop? What does that look like from the faculty side as well? So I think that's a really important point.
I also wanted to bring up something that you sort of touched on there, Maddie, about students having all very unique needs, and that was one of the related to one of the trends in the Horizon report this year, about the student demographics changing, and this is something that obviously has been happening for years. It's just in terms of the relevance for the time and the place that we're in right now, something that the panel really wanted to raise awareness about. And so often, and I know working at institutions in the past, we would constantly have to remind ourselves and our colleagues, student does not mean 18 to 22-year-old necessarily. Student does not necessarily mean somebody who is trying to just get a 4-year degree to get a job. Like there are so many sort of stereotypes that are less and less relevant as the years go on. And that's so important when we think about meeting students where they are. So am I talking to a 19-year-old student who's recently graduated from high school and has this completely different life experience than, let's say, maybe I'm talking to a 45-year-old single mom, who's working a full-time job and coming to school for maybe a completely different reason. So I think that is something that has to be top of mind when we think about meeting students where they are.
And that's important for recruitment. We tried really hard to recruit in a wide range of different places so that we could get a larger audience demographic to be able to focus groups. So we wanted people from those different experiences and those different kinds of histories and narratives so that they could tell us what their personal technology experience is and maybe how we could help other students like them. And so it's allowed them to feel seen as part of a college demographic, whereas sometimes if they're not a traditional student, they may not feel as engaged or involved.
Yeah, can you, both of you, maybe talk a little bit more about that process of trying to bring students together in a more, let's say, equity-minded way, trying to have a diverse voice, set of voices in your advisory group? I know that that's something that was planful for you from the beginning.
That's right. I'll speak briefly high level, that then Stephanie knows quite a bit of the details and was instrumental for that. So early on, we sought out key stakeholders around the university so that we had their buy-in on what we were trying to do, and also access to the student populations that they knew really well. And so once we had the concept of how we wanted to utilize a student technology advisory group, specifically around the implementation of technology and their access to it, we talked to lots of leaders around the university. One in particular was Brian Kaskaskia, who's the Assistant Vice President for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. And Brian was fantastic in helping us better understand student motivation, and not monolithic student motivation, but the many motivations that students of all walks of life bring to their university experience, and really helped us think about, if we wanted to, using a metaphor, cast a wide net in terms of trying to invite as many kinds of students to the advisory board as possible. It was that kind of framing that really helped. So I think for any other institutions that are considering something like this, making sure that key stakeholders not only have buy-in but also have influence on the approach. I cannot discount, or I cannot count enough sort of how important that step was, as you said, Janae, being very planful about this before we talked to the students and brought them into the fold. But once we had a better idea, as much as you can have a better idea, right? We thought we knew a little bit more. Then we started a plan to actually communicate to the students and meet new students.
Yeah, so we got access to send things out on different listservs to different student organizations and different groups, as well as like student leaders. And then we also did some, in-person outreach as well. And so as we started hosting having informational sessions for people, sometimes we would realize that all the students were coming from one place, right? One major or one campus or something. And so then we would know that we would need to also do a little bit more work in other areas to kind of get a wider range of students. And so by the end of kind of the informational sessions, we had a really good starting point for our student group. And as we kind of worked through that, we realized where their areas of interest and the things that they wanted to engage with were. And after this first year of having students who were everywhere from local but world campus students, we also had some full-time people who are working and then doing this as well. We really created a community, and all of them want to come back for round 2. So they're all going to serve another term. And they've also recommended other places where we could maybe try to recruit, as well as among their own friend groups and classmates. And we've also had other students who've heard about it through a variety of different experiences that we've shared and also want to join. So we're trying to partner with some of the colleges that don't have representation so that we could, widen that as well.
So while we had some initial success, as Stephanie describes, there's so many more student groups that we want to connect with. I mean, this is constantly something that we can grow and get better at and make better connections with. So looking forward to year 2 and another recruitment drive.
Congrats. It sounds like you've learned a lot. It is wild with all the technology out there, how much word of mouth matters too, in terms of spreading the word and building buy-in. And one of the videos we have in the showcase talks about the student experience from a technology perspective, but also outside of technology. And it was a really good reminder to me of, there was one example that the speaker shared, I think, of students who were trying to figure out how their major mapped to a career, and they were doing some work to, share information, build relationships, things like that. And then they decided just to bring in alumni speakers who worked in those careers to help students understand what their career could look like later. And it was a good reminder to me of, we're talking about meeting students where they are from a technology perspective, but so much is based on those interpersonal conversations and communications and relationship building across the institution as well.
Yeah, I like that, Sophie. Something that my undergrad institution did was they brought in alumni from that program and showed what different careers that you could do with it. So you could kind of gear your courses you were taking towards that career path, and also make connections with those alumni to have potential networking opportunities. So I think that's another way we can help students get access to what they need.
That reminds me of a question that I have around the value of higher education for students. That was one of the trends in the Horizon Report, was that the public perception of the value of higher ed is kind of decreasing. And so your story there, Maddie, about meeting graduates and thinking about career opportunities, it made me wonder what you all are seeing on your campuses about the value students see in a higher ed degree or a higher ed experience? Is that shifting? Is it more career oriented or less career oriented? What are some things that you're seeing there?
I mean, we're seeing a lot of interest from the students when we ask them, what do you want to learn? Or what is it that you're not necessarily getting out of just a traditional classroom experience that we can help provide you? And some of that was internships, right? They want help on what kind of skills do they need. Maybe we could help them network with people, because Penn State has a big alumni association. You know, there are ways that we could either connect them through other people on campus, or by giving them the skills that they need based on what internship or job they want. And so that career preparedness, where you kind of work backwards from the goal and then try to figure out what it is that we can help them with, whether it's through software or skill training. We've been doing some of that as part of the group, just to kind of prepare them for the summer, and some of them were able to acquire internships based on some of that preparedness.
I think there's an overall streamlining effect going on, that there are, and without specific examples in mind, but there are, things that universities have historically done, right, from a student engagement perspective, or opportunities for students to engage outside of their either discipline or their career path, that maybe isn't as relevant anymore. And so there's a reconsideration or streamlining of what those opportunities look like. I think there is, to some degree, more alignment against the postgraduate outcomes. And I think students gravitate towards that. They want it to be impactful. They want it to be meaningful. And when they're spending so much money and their time is so limited, it's hard to fault them for that, for wanting to be efficient in the way that they spend their time for education. And I don't see that as a problem. I see it as an opportunity for us as representing institutions, to better align those opportunities to their needs, right? And hear them out when that's what they're describing, and how they're approaching their education.
I think that's great. And it's kind of an important reminder that so much happens outside of the classroom as well. You know, the student experience as a whole involves all of these elements you mentioned of making sure that they're seeing the value of going to college, especially as public perceptions are changing. And that does look like classroom work, but it also looks like student organizations, and making sure that folks have access to the career center, and that that's a good experience for them, and mental health support that is, you know, streamlined in order to support them in the way that they need. One of the speakers in our video mentioned that an example of first generation students, and how even just some of the phrasing that we use in higher ed can be exclusive, saying office hours. You know, someone might not know, if they haven't had a family member attend college in the past, that means this is a time that you go talk to the professor about help that you need. So I think just thinking about where students are coming from and how different those life experiences are is so important.
I'm glad that you brought up the mental health aspect of supporting students outside of the classroom, because that also was one of the key texts and practices in this year's Horizon report. So interestingly, though, the panel talked about supporting mental health in a much larger way than just supporting students' mental health. It was students, faculty, and staff, all of us needing help in that way. So yeah, I'd be interested to hear from anyone if there's any interesting overlap between the area that you're doing and supporting students in that holistic way, perhaps specifically mental health, but perhaps in other ways. And I mean, it could look like engaging students in different ways, or using technology as specific supports, but just curious what y'all have going on in that space.
So one of the groups that we actually try to work with and reach is the Fast Start Mentorship Program at Penn State, where I'm actually a mentor for students, and they provide you with some training as well as ways for you to engage with students and how to make them feel more confident in learning. And so teaching technology confidence is actually another thing that is one of our goals in our organization, is that you don't have to come in with any prerequisite knowledge in order to gain some skills and to become more confident in it. And so we never assume that the students have had experience with any of the things that we're doing, as well as if they maybe feel a little bit nervous about kind of engaging, we've also encouraged them to bring a friend, that they can also experience this with too. So maybe it's easier if they come with someone to these meetings or to our activities. So it gives them a chance to not have to do it all on their own.
I love that. That's technology confidence. That's what the phrase was. That's great.
I like that. Also, planning, I think, activities outside the classroom, like, for example, the support dogs. I think that's kind of a fun way to release any stressors or talk to other people about maybe classes that you might be encountering that are similar. Yeah, taking advantage of mental health resources also within the institution is a great way. Like, they've been offering it for staff, students, faculty, anybody to come in and have somebody to talk to. So I think there's several resources that people can take advantage of on campus, because I know everyone can be going through different unique experiences, no matter who they are.
Yeah, that's such an important point, that as practitioners, we also need that support. If we're going to meet students where they are, we have to come with a full cup. And where does that come from? How do we engage meaningfully with our work? What supports are there at the institution to be confident in that space? It's a very vulnerable thing to be a person who engages with students on a regular basis, because students come with all of these complicated lives and dreams and goals, and we want to do our very best. And I think that when we throw ourselves into that 110%, as most of us do, that's a very vulnerable place to be. I still tell these stories about Penn State, actually, working at Penn State, the supports that are in place for faculty and staff using emerging technology are incredible, because when I was teaching classes at Penn State, I didn't have to know how to use all of the technologies my students needed to be able to use. I could just go to Ryan's team, for example, and say, and I did this on more than one occasion, and say, I want to use technology X. I have no idea what I'm doing. Can you help teach me and my students at the same time? And can we go on this journey together? So I think it's important for us, especially thinking about who might be listening to this show, is that for us to meet students where they are, there's some support that we need as well from our institution, and we have to think about what that support looks like.
Definitely. Our last Showcase Shop Talk was about hiring resilience, and we talked about 3 EDUCAUSE workforce reports. And I won't dive into them too much, but there was a lot of data about staff being burnt out. I think the most recent one I looked at had, I think, 70% of IT leaders saying they had a somewhat excessive or excessive workload. So, some of that is managing those workloads and trying to scale down the amount of work we're doing with less staff or resources. And then, some is using these mental health supports and self-care routines and all of that are available.
I think that one of the big things that we really try to do in our group is to make things fun. Like, not just fun for the students, but fun for us. Like, we enjoy those activities as much as anybody and coming up with them. So being able to kind of share that and kind of be creative in that process too, it really kind of lowers that access barrier to technology, because you don't have to get the technology right. A lot of times technology doesn't work right. And so if you just kind of embrace that and kind of talk about the other aspects and the other takeaways, you still learn the technology, but you have a good time when you're doing it.
Yeah, to build on that, when we think about our design principles for creating services or on-ramps to technologies like Janae describes having used in the past, it always starts with two core concepts. We design around empathy and we design around creativity. And those two together will, if you do it right, and right is such a negotiable term there of what that looks like, and it's dependent on so many contexts for individuals, but you are providing, it's another way to provide access. It's not just about handing them the thing and saying, okay, do whatever. It's that technology confidence, not only in knowing what buttons to push, but how can you tell your story through it, and a meaningful story, and really empowering them to do that. And so we try to keep that front and center for any of the services or new technologies or technology workflows that we implement, along with having that student buy-in.
I think Janae and I both went to this workshop last year. The idea of fun made me think of this, Janae. But at one of our EDUCAUSE conferences last year, there was a pre-conference session by a group called Professors at Play. And they had a lot of research about how bringing fun into the workplace and the classroom has better outcomes. And I don't remember all of the research, but I remember being in that workshop, having a great time, and that I learned a lot about how, we don't have to be so serious in academia to have the outcomes that we want. I think we threw sticky hands at a wall for a while, and then we built something and threw balls at it to knock it down. And I feel like I took more away from that pre-conference session than a lot of maybe more formal PowerPoint style lectures that I've gone to. So I think that's a great message about, how we all connect as humans too.
Yeah, that was David Thomas was the presenter. So if folks are interested in digging deeper into that work, Professors at Play, David Thomas is at University of Denver, and he has the most enviable job, which is he's a play researcher. It's such a delightful topic. But yeah, I love that centering on, that's actually one of our core values at EDUCAUSE too, is having fun, doing really impactful work and having fun while we do it.
Yeah, and Lisa Forbes also supports that. She's a professor and has studied mental health. I believe she's been a counselor in the past, but decided to add this play component to her work, and it's been really impactful.
One of our teaching and learning with technology research students, who's a doctoral student in learning design and technology, has been actually working with my museum studies course, and we've integrated play into the studio culture, and it's made a huge difference this year. And you see the students thrive, and become more kind of curious and courageous in their learning because they're not afraid.
I feel like we could have a whole separate episode that just focuses on integrating creativity and play in school. We should think about that. I know that we're getting kind of close to the end, and I was hoping we could end on an actionable note. So I was just thinking, if I'm listening to this as a podcast or watching this on YouTube, and I want to walk away with an action I can take right away. I want to meet students where they are. What should I do about it? I thought maybe we could all give a little recommendation of, here's one simple action you can take to be better at meeting students where they are. So what do y'all think?
That's such a great idea, Janae. I can start. Find ways to listen, right? So find ways to listen to your students. And it takes time to build a program, right? Or a big thing, thought out thing that students can engage in. And while you should pursue that, that should not mean that you're not listening until you have that done. You should listen to the students you have available. So probably there are student workers, right, that are employed in a variety of different offices around your area, and making sure that you're getting their feedback about the work that they're doing, or the opportunities that they see, or the pain points that they have in their uses of technology, or whatever the particular discipline is. I think that's a place to start. And so if you're not listening, you should be listening and finding ways to do that.
And for me, I think it's just to ask yourself what it was you needed when you were in school, and how that may be similar, but maybe take a different form for students now. So I was a first-gen college student, and I knew I needed a lot of help with trying to transition into college. And that's still really important for students on how to do that. And so depending on what it was that you needed, you probably can, kind of relate to what students are still experiencing today.
I agree with both of those points. Take into account your student population and what their needs are, and collect that feedback for further action items. But also think about issues that are on your campus right now. What can you do to solve them? Like, what are your needs currently, and what are the steps you can take to bring that to meet those needs, and create new projects for student access.
Yeah, I'll plus one to all of that. And I think as a researcher, I'm always biased towards conducting research. So I'll say do research in whatever way you can. It doesn't necessarily mean you have a big survey, university-wide, IRB approved. Like it can be small research. One of the stories, and I guess Ryan being here has my brain back at my Penn State days, but one of the things that I like to tell is the time when Jennifer Sparrow had us all go out and talk to two students. We would have our annual all staff meeting at the hub, the student center. And she said, lunch is on me, but you have to earn your lunch ticket. You have to go out, talk to two students, and ask them some questions and bring back that information. And we use that information to actually affect change on our campus. So be creative, think about different ways that you can get information, talk to students, and be collaborative with them.